And get started, I just want to add a couple comments. We have been hosting a series of alumni panels throughout the years that I've been here. And I think the one thing that's been notable, and I've shared this with student groups before, is how incredibly valuable they've been. And if we're presenting, I don't know why you guys walk out the door at the end. But generally, when you're at an alumni presentation, you'll stay and engage with our guests, and I hope that's true this evening. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions, but oftentimes you may have some individual questions for panelists, and based on their schedules, they may be able to hang in there with us for a short period of time after we wrap up. But they're truly a wealth of knowledge, can be incredible mentors for you, sources of information about fields that you may be exploring. So definitely want to encourage you to take advantage of that. At this time, I'd like to introduce the young lady who put this all together, our special events coordinator, Jackie Jebulor. Jackie has been with us for 2 years, and she moved into her role as special events coordinator this year, and she is going to moderate this evening's panel. Jack?
So good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a great day today. My name is Jackie, and I just want to thank you all for coming out here today, and especially a thank you to all our panelists who made today possible, because we would not all be here without them. Unfortunately, if you're looking through your pamphlets, Thalia was unable to attend today. She was ill, so she stayed home. However, she did give me some words that she wanted to share with you guys, which I will share between our panel portion and then opening the floor to you guys for questions. And so to kick off our panel, I would like to first have each of you introduce yourselves, maybe give a brief description of like your time at IBU experiences, and then also maybe something about your professional background as well.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Meyernick. I'm a 2007 graduate of Wesleyan here. My gateway class was actually with Dr. Tooney, a utopian thought. Dr. Tooney was my faculty instructor for then the balance of my English writing major when I was here. After Wesleyan, I went to Southern Illinois University School of Law. I got my JD in 2010 and been practicing law since. Did a little bit of time in Champaign County working in private practice in Urbana, and I've been in private practice in Bloomington for the past 5.5 years. And I was lucky enough to marry a Wesleyan alum, and she was an accounting major. And she asked me when I was an English major, what was I going to do with my degree, and I said, oh, well, I was going to write for Rolling Stone magazine. She told me that I should maybe think that over a little bit. And so law school ended up being a good alternative to Rolling Stone not responding to my letters. So, she's worked as an accountant for a number of years, and now is a stay-at-home mom with her 2 kids.
My name is Akash. I graduated from Wesleyan in 2014. I graduated with a degree in music and psychology, but like many other people, I came in not really settling on that at first. I was exploring things, and throughout that, I decided to become a music therapist, and that's what I do right now. I'm a board-certified music therapist, and then also a licensed professional counselor. I currently work at an inpatient psychiatric hospital as a music therapist full-time, and a private practice also as a music therapist part-time. And next week I will be full-time at the private practice and no longer at the hospital. So that's a new change for me. While at Wesleyan, I was involved in collegiate choir, student senate, South Asian Student Association, a lot of like cultural organizations. That's about it.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Gilbert. I graduated from Wesleyan in 2005. I think I might be the most mature, maybe not mature, but to pick on Mike too a little bit. I'm so old that I was here when he was hired. Oh. Yeah, and was in probably his first classes that he taught here. So when I was at Wesleyan, I was really involved in the English department. I worked in the English house as a student worker for 3 or 4 years. When I graduated, I became the secretary of that place for about a year before I went to grad school. But I was also in band, and I was co-editor of Tributaries, and I helped co-found the Tongue and Ink Conference. I don't know if that still happens or not. It doesn't? Oh, that's sad. And it kept very, very busy. Now I am a professor of English at Hart Community College. I got that gig after adjuncting at ICC in Peoria for a year, and I got the degree to be able to do that by going to the University of Chicago in their Master of Arts program in Humanities, which was a 1-year intensive. Intensive is the important word there, to get that degree, and so I'm still happily at Heartland. I've been there for 11 years now, full professor, and now I also have 2 kids at home. And my husband is a musician by trade, so he plays Mr. Mom while I'm at work, and then I'm at home when he's gigging, so nice balance.
Hi, my name is Colleen O'Connor. I graduated in 2014 with degrees in English writing and psychology. I started off just in psychology, wanted to be a counselor, and was taking some poetry classes, and my Toonie told me it was absurd that I was not pursuing an English major. So, I decided to do both. I was really involved in Tributaries and lyrical graffiti, and then also in a lot of psych research in that department. Right out of school, I started working in substance abuse counseling at Advocate Berman, thanks to a connection of Warren's. And I did that for 2 years, and then decided that I wanted to move towards substance abuse prevention education. So I started providing substance abuse prevention education through Project Oz. But while I was in the classroom teaching, addiction prevention, I realized that none of the schools were really providing mental health education or suicide prevention, which was something that I really, really needed when I was young. So I started our town's local chapter of NAMI Ending the Silence, which is a teen suicide prevention program. So now I run that. I coordinate volunteers, and we go into all of the middle schools and the high schools in the county and talk to young people about why it's important for us to talk about mental health and what we can do to take care of each other.
Thank you so much. Okay, so kind of we're going to start off talking about our education and like the liberal arts aspect. So can each of you speak to how liberal arts and the skills that you gained through your education here helped you in your professional world and careers?
Sure. With, again, my major was English writing, and I also had a minor in business administration. And what was nice about both of those programs was just the different faculty members and professors who you had to write for. And one of the best things that I was able to draw from that, it's still applicable today, is learning who is your audience and how is it that you present to your audience. And in private practice, for example, if I'm in front of a particular judge, and it's not necessarily written, but I understand, okay, if this particular judge is this type of person, this is what my experience has been working with them, and this is how I need to tailor that, which I'm doing to make sure that it comes across in the way that I want it. So again, just learning about, again, who your audience is and how it is that you need to present for your audience has been extremely valuable for myself.
I would say before I came to Weston, I was not a good writer. I would not want to read anything I wrote before, maybe my gateway class. So I think that class and then all the other classes really challenged me to write, even in classes I didn't expect, like my music classes as well. And now I like writing. It was much easier than I thought to write my master's thesis. I'm continuing to write after that, and I don't think I would have done that without a liberal arts education. Also, I was encouraged here to like organize events, and I think a lot of the organizations here are very heavily like student run. There's faculty guidance, but they really like encourage students to take the lead. So I like comfortable reaching out to people, organizing events now as well.
I think for me, the liberal arts education allowed me to see the importance of continuing to learn in a bunch of different disciplines, even if it wasn't my main focus. And that kind of played out through the rest of my career as I kept going. For example, I was an English major. I was also concentration in writing, but I found a lot of other things interesting. I also did a business minor. I took all kinds of classes, and there was a class I took on like diseases in ancient Greece or something. It was just all sorts of interesting things, because I also was really into science growing up, and I wasn't quite ready to let go of that love of science. And so being able to look at all of those different disciplines with an interest, maybe through the lens of writing, and being an English or writing major was super helpful. In fact, I a few years ago did a sabbatical semester where I went to Los Angeles and cleaned fossils in the La Brea tar pits, and then subsequently wrote a poetry manuscript involving paleontology and my family history with that area, which I'm trying to get published. But the idea was that I was still able to, I've learned that it's an awesome thing to hold on to those passions and all those different areas of disciplines and still have contact with them and find a way to bring them into what your real focus is.
I think that what I learned most here and what the goal is of liberal arts education is that I am in charge of determining my story. That I can't just wait for things to happen, and I can't just follow a path that everybody else has followed, that it's up to me to figure out what I want to happen and then to make it happen. So I had an enormous amount of opportunities for individual projects, things that I would approach a professor about, and they would say, you know what, I've never done that before, but let's try it. Even like in my English degree, my research honors explored mental health, which I was learning about in psychology. And then in psychology, I got to do research on how we can use writing to benefit our mental health. So I had all of these opportunities to overlap the things that I cared about. And it also taught me that I have to take initiative, that I can't just allow things to occur, but that I have to figure out what happens next.
Actually, speaking to that, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So you spoke of how liberal arts taught you how to like take the reins in a sense to like your future and stuff like that. Can you speak of any challenges you had to overcome while doing so?
Yes, can you rephrase that so I make sure I understand it?
Sure. So speaking to specifically finding what direction you wanted to go to in your professional like career and whatnot, what's some challenges that you faced?
Sure. So I think that I always thought that I wanted to be a counselor, and that's what I started doing. I started my job the day after graduation, and I enjoyed it, but I also started to realize that what I had pictured for my entire life since I was like 12 was not actually what counseling was, and that it maybe wasn't what I was looking for. So that was a big shock to me, because I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I've been preparing for, this is what I've been waiting for. And then I had to recognize that sometimes you plan something, and then you have to be willing to let it change in order to grow. So there were things that I loved about my job, but I also got to a point when I was working at the hospital in substance abuse counseling that I realized that I had to do something different. So it was a challenge for me to kind of accept that the plan had to change. But in accepting that and in exploring other things that I hadn't planned on doing, I found something that gives me a greater purpose than what I had initially intended. So I think that we spend a lot of time preparing for what we expect, but we have to be willing to go a little bit off the track in order to find what really brings us joy, even if it's not something we've ever pictured for ourselves.
And Kathy, you actually mentioned how you had this kind of pull between English and science. Can you speak to that as well? Like how you kind of were able to decide, oh, English is the path for me, and like able to kind of overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think for me, what I eventually realized, I guess thankfully for me, before I came to college, so I already knew what my English, I was going to be an English major when I got here. But for me, it always came down to the fact that I loved stories. And I think for me, the thing I love about science is the story that it tells. And so rather than trying to get embedded in all the technicalities of science, I mean, I was the nerd who in 8th grade, I would skip gym class to go file the slides, like the microscope slides. I got out of gym class to do this. I'm not kidding. I love science that much. But what I loved about it was viewing things and seeing things, which I think was maybe my early development of like the poet's eye and being able to look at the world and find those minute things really important and beautiful. and worthy of story. And so I think why I ended up going the English route is because I really ended up just liking the story of it all, perhaps. And the challenge for me then was not necessarily making that decision, but finding a way to still stoke the fire of that passion without giving up on the English thing. So finding a way to kind of mesh the two together. I was also really heavily involved in music. I mean, I played music when I was here. I married a musician, right? Like, music is really important. And so trying to find ways to keep that part of my life as well has been an interesting challenge. And luckily, I've had some cool opportunities to do that. My husband is a percussionist, and he does all kinds of percussion. He plays drum set in rock bands, and he's done country music and jazz, but he also plays gongs for sound therapy. And I had him come and do a gong meditation for my creative writing class for their final exam, so they could write about the experience. I mean, I made it work, right? So there's always this challenge of trying to figure out how to pull all of your disparate interests and not let go of them, and make them fit the path that you're wanting to go on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And then Matt, can you speak of any challenges that helped you kind of grow into the person that you are today, both professionally and even personally?
Sure. I would say when I came into Wesleyan, I said earlier that my goal was to be a rock journalist for Rolling Stone. That didn't work out, so law school then became a suitable alternative. When I started law school, I said, okay, there's two areas of law that I'm never going to practice. One is bankruptcy, and then two is family law. And fast forward 7.5 years later, the only time I've been in federal court has been for bankruptcy. Just Thursday, I was in court, Friday, I was in court for 4 different family law matters. And so the bankruptcy it is what it is. You're not dealing with people who are happy to be meeting with you. Family law, the same. You're generally meeting with people who are at their emotional and financial low. But the goal is, trying to help somebody, and that's something that I enjoyed and have always enjoyed. Whether it was being a student or working as an intern, and so don't go into something with a closed mind or with visors thinking that this is the only alternative, because even though, for example, again, I've only done federal bankruptcy practice, and I started off in family law, my practice over the past 7 years has expanded quite a bit, and I've been able to grow and develop specific niches of the practice that are unique to myself, and I get to then do the things that I really enjoy as a result now. So just keep an open mind. If a door closes and a window opens, it's a little cliche, but I think it's very true.
Gosh, so I think music therapy is really cool and whatnot. Can you kind of share how you knew that was kind of the path you wanted to take, and then also what a day in the life of a music therapist kind of looks like? Because I'm not completely aware what that looks like.
Sure. So, like a lot of you, I had all of these interests, and music therapy seemed to be like the logical combination of all of my interests with science, music, psychology, research, all of these things coming together. And I kind of found that out through Wesleyan. So there's a faculty member in the music department who used to be a music therapist, so she made me aware of that the field existed. And I also came to the career services department, and they also just acknowledged yeah, this is a real thing, you can go into it, and you probably should. So that's how I came to know of it, and I guess I'll walk through the day in the life of a music therapist. It really depends on where the music therapist works. So in a psych hospital, I do group therapy. I also do assessments. Assessments are mostly verbal at a psych hospital. Group therapy, I bring in a bunch of instruments and this giant cart that's very flashy, and when I have a group, I pass out instruments and we make music together. We either improvise, so free-flowing music, spontaneous music making, or we create a song that might be relevant to the patients, what they're going through. We might write a song, and for music therapy, the goal is always, or almost always, non-musical. So it's not really that they're learning anything about music, they're learning something about themselves or something about like managing their mood or managing substance use, managing anxiety, things like that. And at a private practice, I do individual sessions, mostly with children with developmental disabilities, autism spectrum disorder. Assessments are very long, like 3 sessions, and there's a lot of music in assessments. So those are some differences in the base of music therapists, I guess.
Thank you. And so, with all your experiences and whatnot, in hindsight, there's always 2020. Can you speak to, or like maybe give a piece of advice that you wish you knew, maybe that these students would like to hear, and that would have helped maybe with your development and growth here at Illinois Wesleyan University?
Sure, I'll start. I think while I was a student for the first 3-ish years, I kind of didn't know Bloomington Normal existed. I just knew Wesleyan existed. And I really didn't do anything outside of the confines of the university. And then when I was a senior, I started volunteering at Path Crisis Center, which is a local crisis center with a suicide prevention hotline. And that changed everything for me my senior year. And I wouldn't have changed how I found it, in the sense that it came to me at the right time. But I think there are a lot of volunteer opportunities that are available in this community, and there's lots of really cool stuff that's happening across the street. And I didn't know about it because I was so centered here. I think it's good to be centered here and to do everything you can at the university, but I wish that I had explored a little bit further, a little bit earlier, because there were a lot of awesome things going on that I didn't know were even there.
Yeah, sort of combining this idea of exploration and something Nat said earlier about being open to new possibilities, right? I think for me, another way of putting that is don't feel like you have to have it all figured out by the time you finish senior year. I think most students that come to Illinois Wesleyan are the same kind of high achieving, overachieving kind of people like I was, and I felt a lot of pressure to kind of figure it all out. But I didn't have it figured out. In fact, I took a gap year before I went to grad school, which ended up being great because I got a job here on campus and I could literally pound on professors' doors for recommendation letters to get into grad school. So I highly recommend staying local if you plan on going to grad school later. But not having it figured out was an important thing to learn how to feel comfortable with. So kind of giving yourself grace to feel uncomfortable with not knowing what's going to happen. And even when I did end up going to grad school, I was just dead set that I was going to go all the way, get a PhD, work in an institution just like Wesleyan, and it just didn't end up being the thing that I really felt called to do. I happened to take a class while I was in grad school called Teaching in the Community College, and it was an amazing and prophetic choice for me to take that class because it really showed me a pathway that I thought would be great and a way to serve people that I wasn't thinking of before. So yeah, just being comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess, is sort of the advice that I would give.
I'd like to add something to that. Actually, that really resonates with me. So in terms of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, I also think I didn't learn early enough that you really do have to start taking care of yourself now. It took me a long time of being an overachiever and pushing myself really hard and not sleeping and not eating and doing 5,000 things all at the same time. And then years of that before I realized that that's not sustainable. So if you identify with that, if you're pushing yourself really hard all the time, it's great to achieve things, but also nobody else can take care of you for you. That has to be a choice that you make, and you have to put yourself high up on the list in terms of what's important to you. Because if you prioritize your classes and your future career and all of these other 5 million things people want from you, it's really easy to find yourself starting to become unwell. So I just want to add that all the stuff you do here is important, but none of those things are as important as you being okay and being healthy. Took me a long time to figure that out. Yeah.
Kind of echoing what was just said, listening to yourself as a way to take care of yourself. So if you don't need to do something, you don't have to do it, or listening to the community. So one thing I struggled with was I really wanted to work with South Asian Americans in mental health, but it kind of became like stressful for myself because I wasn't really listening to what the needs of the community were, and this was like kind of at the end of Wesleyan and into grad school. But what really helped me in the end was that I joined an existing community. It was also NAMI, but in New Jersey, near where I went to grad school. And I listened to what they needed, and I learned so much from them, and it just made things easier that, I'm teaming up with someone, with a group of people that know what they need, and it's easier then for me to figure out how I can serve them. Sometimes I felt at Wesleyan, I felt like I had to do all of these things to make myself stand out so I can get into grad school, but it does become exhausting, and it's kind of like you're losing the purpose of what if you want to be in the helping professions, you're kind of losing that value. You're not, I don't know how much you're going to be helping.
I would say, I realize that free time isn't something that a lot of people have while you're at Wesleyan. There's, I think, a certain type of Wesleyan student, not to toot our own horns, but generally we're here all for a reason. We all have a similar drive, and that makes taking time for yourself, for example, maybe not the biggest priority. One thing that I did not have as an experience when I was here was an internship, working either in a law firm or state's attorney's office, public defender's office, or anything involving courthouse. And so when I went to law school, I had this vision of, well, this is what being an attorney was going to be, but my dad's a plumber and my mom was a beautician, and the only attorneys that I ever saw growing up were on TV. So I did not know when I went to law school really what I was getting into, other than law school sounded fancy, and I was going to be an attorney, wow. And then I went to private practice, and that sounds pretty cool too. But when the judge tells you that, hey, this day, this time, be there, and then maybe you're not feeling that good that day, and the judge says, well, I don't care, you need to be here this day at this time. And so there are components of the job, specifically with the litigation-based private practice, that I was simply just not aware of. I was blissfully ignorant of it. And so if I'm sitting where you guys are sitting, I had this tunnel vision that, okay, internships, I was going to get an internship. Well, I was unable to get an internship at any law firms, as I said, and again, didn't have that experience working in law before going into law school. So reach out, take advantage of the Career Center. Warren is a wealth of information. He knows more people than anybody else I know. And if he can find a connection for you, he will. And reach out to an alumni. There's plenty of alumni who are certainly local. And ask them to have lunch with you. Ask them to have dinner with them. Ask them to buy you dinner. Take the opportunity to meet with them and ask them about hey, what is we talked about it, what's a day in the life for music therapy? What's a day in the life of a private practice attorney? What's the day in the life of professors? What is it that you actually do? And so when you're kind of focusing what you're thinking about doing, you kind of have a better idea to it of what you want to do, and then also too, with all due respect, this is a time in life where you can work for free. So paid internships are all well and great, but unpaid internships or even a job shadow for a day. Take advantage of any opportunity to get to learn more about what you want to do and tap the alumni network that you have. Just last Tuesday, I was talking with a Wesleyan alum in a completely different area. You'll notice that when you meet alums, everybody kind of has the same type of person. It's really easy to connect and have a conversation, and you can take advantage of that to the best you can.
I was always too scared to talk to alumni. I'm an English professor, and I talk in the classroom, and I'm talking in front of you all right now. And you might not know this, but I'm actually an introvert. I'll need to go sit by myself after this for a little while. And so the idea of talking to strangers was really scary to me. But I've spoken to a lot of Wesleyan students as an alumni, and I promise we don't bite. I promise we're super helpful and nice, and we love to answer questions about our field and about ways that we can help you kind of think about your future. So please reach out.
No one's ever told me no.
Yeah.
And I was shocked if somebody else did. Mm-hmm. But I can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Matt, you actually kind of touched on it. Like, it's important for like students when trying to choose the career paths and stuff like that to kind of understand completely like what does this job role carry with it. So, Akash, you kind of covered that with the one question that I asked prior. So, Matt, Kathy, and Colleen, would you kind of want to go through and give like a brief description of like what a day in the life basically is in your career?
Sure, I can start. So, since I run a teen suicide prevention program, so the bulk of my time is spent in the classroom talking to young people. So the program that I run is 2 days in health class, and it's a combination of education and storytelling. So I get to use my psych degree, but also my English degree, because I help volunteers figure out the best way to communicate their story. So I work with 6th graders, I work with 9th graders. So world of difference between those two experiences. So sometimes I'm just trying to keep kids in their seats and to stop throwing pencils. And then sometimes we get into these really deep discussions. So, but I get to travel all over the county. Sometimes I'm right here, at Bloomington Junior High School. Sometimes I'm out in Colfax or Hayworth or basically anywhere within the limits of McLean County. I figured out how to get there. And that's really enjoyable, but then I also have a lot of administrative things that I do. I'm really involved in the grant writing in our agency, so I do a lot of like figuring out how we can get resources. So for the nitty-gritty stuff, like how do you actually fund these things? How do you make them happen? And then I manage about 12 volunteers, many of whom are college students who have some personal experience with mental health and want to share that with kids. So I'm grateful that I don't spend every day in the classroom. I'm always, I very much admire the classroom teachers who want to be there every single day, but I want to be there for a couple days and then I want to go back to my office and close the door. So it's nice to have some classroom stuff and then to get to take a break. And then I also get to do suicide prevention education in some community settings. Like earlier this year I went to Westminster, which is for older people. So now I've worked with kids from ages 10 to 101. He was still a kid, the 101-year-old. He had a lot of interesting things to say. And then I'm also doing some training with the student athletes at ISU. So lots of different areas have recognized the need for suicide prevention education. So I'm always getting to change who my population is. And that's a lot of fun because the way that you teach a 10-year-old is very different than the way you teach a college student or someone at a business or someone at a church. So it's nice to use all those different skills.
So you may think that you might know what being a professor looks like since you have such contact with them, right? You see them in the classroom, you go to office hours. Hopefully you go to office hours, right? You might see them walking across the campus between their classes, you might see them grading papers somewhere, and I do all of that, and I had that all in my head as I wanted to think about becoming a professor, but I do quite a bit more than that, right? And a lot of it goes unseen, right? So just for example, right now, this semester at Wesleyan, I'm teaching 5 classes. Most of them are in the classroom, but a couple of them are hybrid, which means, of course, I see them part of the week in the classroom and part online. I also teach online sometimes, so a lot of that work is totally unseen. I also work in the writing center at Heartland, just sort of like the writing lab that you might have here. I actually helped reestablish the writing center years ago when they dissolved it, and I had to rebuild it. So that was another thing that I did as part of the job. I also hold office hours and create curricula and grade papers that really multiply. You might be wondering why your teacher isn't getting that paper back to you right away. Well, there's so many of them. There's so many of them, and they just, if you don't grade them right away, they really multiply. They just keep coming. And I go to faculty meetings and help program revision and thinking about those sorts of things. I'm also thinking about my own professional developments and looking at keeping up with my own writing and publishing work and going to conferences when I can. Seeking out opportunities to get out of this country. I recently was on a phone interview, and they're great to practice for. You should definitely practice for phone interviews to secure a possible position to teach for a semester in Seville, Spain. And so I'm always looking for more things to do to improve myself as a teacher and just kind of life experience to bring back to the classroom. So many things. Writing proposals, writing recommendation letters, Oh my God, so many things that you don't see when you're just in the classroom.
My job, it's again a little cliche to say that no one day is the same, but that truly is the case. There's essentially three components of what I do. One is going to be client interaction, whether that's an initial consultation where we're meeting for the first time and talking about whatever an issue may be, or whether it's subsequent contact either by phone or in person based on what's happening in a particular case. Another aspect would be actual court appearances. Those could be for both substantive and non-substantive hearings. A non-substantive hearing can literally be a minute in front of the judge's bench, just touching base with the opposing counsel and the judge as to what's going on. A substantive hearing can quite literally be a day long, or even longer if the judge does not want the witness to be left under oath for a week or something along those lines. And then the third component would be whether it's doing research on a particular issue, or whether it's drafting a pleading or a motion or a nasty gram or something along those lines to a specific problem or something that I'm looking into. And so, again, one day can be all office, the next day can be all court, the next can be a mixed bag of the two, and then you throw in the occasional professional development and try to get additional certifications to do other fun things in the court and stuff. But today was a couple office consultations. Tomorrow will be office and court, and probably be different than the previous two.
Thank you. And so before I open up the floor to you guys to ask some questions, whatnot, I kind of want to read what Thalia had to say, because you guys all beautifully touched on what she has to say. And so I'll just start. So these are her experiences as a young professional and then also being a student here at ILU. When I graduated from Illinois Wesleyan in 2016, I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I had was a Hispanic study degree, student debt, and a lot of charm. Thankfully, my mentor and former executive director of the Immigration Project gave me the opportunity to apply to the American Visa Program, which is essentially the Peace Corps, and I became the volunteer coordinator at the Immigration Project. That was such a great year for me. It taught me more about being a supervisor, it gave me the opportunity to develop and revamp the volunteer and intern program, and it just gave me the push I needed. When my year ended, again, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And again, my amazing friends and supervisors at the Immigration Project gave me the opportunity to become a Department of Justice accredited representative, which means that I was certified by the Department of Justice to give legal advice on immigration matters. I feel so privileged to have given the opportunity. I finally felt like this is what I was meant to do. I was helping my DACA kids, helping clients on temporary status. I was learning about victims of crime, and I felt like I was on top of the world. But suddenly things started to change. The news kept getting nastier. My work and my personal life became one, and I had to reevaluate what I wanted to do. Illinois Wesleyan University gave me the tools to say, whoa, hold on there, find your passion. I called one of my former professors, Dr. Rodriguez, and she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to be happy. So I stopped telling myself, you just have a Hispanic studies degree, and I started using the skills I was taught. I used my connections, I used my experience of studying abroad, I used my ability to think outside the box, and I came to the conclusion that right now I wanted to help first-generation students get into college and make sure they fully understand their capabilities. Know your worth. I don't just have a Hispanic degree, as I now tell myself. I have the overwhelming help of every person at ILU, and with this, I do not feel discouraged at all. Build relationships now, and in the future, you'll be grand. On that note, I'd like to open the floor to questions to all you guys. Yes?
Did any one of you study abroad, and just talk about what that experience was like and how you can relate that back to your career path?
Yes.
Did we all?
Mine is like a short answer. Like I went on a May term trip with collegiate choir, and we were performing, so it doesn't really connect with what I do right now. But it was amazing. If you have that opportunity, please go if you can.
I studied abroad with the London program, which I highly recommend, and I still managed to graduate in 4 years with 2 majors. So you can study abroad and also do the things that you want to do. For me, the best thing about that was it forced me to be on my own and figure it out. So to go from being in a small town and then being dropped in London, and I had other people with me, I had professors, but it was a lot of freedom and it was a lot of time to figure out what I wanted and who I was and to do it in a new place. So I would highly encourage you to study abroad if you have the opportunity, because it was really a game changer for me. It changed my perspective just by kind of startling me out of what I was used to.
Definitely. I did a semester abroad in England, not the London program. I went to the University of East Anglia in Norwich for a spring semester, and yes, all of those things about getting you out of your comfort zone and being forced to take care of yourself. I actually missed the group flight going over there and had a hell of a time just getting there. It's like 36 hours going to all 3 airports in New York. And anyway, but I got there and I learned a lot along the way. The thing that I think connects back to where I am now is learning that like not every institution works the way that the institution I'm in works, and that not every student is like me and not every person is like me. You know that like on a rational level, but I think putting yourself in the middle of other cultures forces you to learn that on a visceral level. And that helps me now because the amount of diversity I see in my students at a community college, it's so wide. I teach everybody from traditional students to 65-year-old grandparents who just have an interest in the subject, or people who've been laid off after 25 years in their career, and they're just all over the place, right? And so knowing that not all of these students are me and trying to learn empathy and be flexible to understanding what they need, a lot of that comes from just having a more sort of worldly view, I guess.
I too did the London program just a couple years apart, but that was a tremendous experience. It was my first time actually leaving the country, so to do it for a 3-month trip was absolutely fantastic. My wife was on that program with us, and she was actually one of 3 Liz's. She was the middle Liz.
I'm sure she'd love that discussion.
Maybe you should call it like the cutest Liz.
She is. She's the most beautiful girl in the world. At the time, she was the middle Liz. Just a tremendous opportunity. There's 12 of us, and the group still actually gets together. We can't do everybody all together, but we try to get at least half dozen or so together annually. And my experience with the study abroad is part of what I use for my personal statement for law school applications, which was great. And then when I was in law school, I did a 6-week study abroad in Ireland doing European Union law, which was really neat because of how law school is taught with the Socratic method here in the States, and abroad it's done entirely different. And so it was a really nice opportunity. One, it's an excuse to be out of the country for 6 weeks, which was great, but also to see how it is that the law is taught over in Europe, and then also to learn a little bit more about the European Union. And then I was also an excellent talking point for subsequent interviews.
Matt, whenever you decided that you were going to go to law school, did you go directly from Wesleyan, or did you take years off? And what would you recommend for us when thinking about that transition?
Sure. I went straight from undergrad right into law school. Hindsight being what it is, a little life experience would have been probably helpful. There was a couple of people in the class my graduating class from SMU, who were literally on their second or third careers. Some people would have life experiences just as hopefully you'll all experience buying a house in the future. If you buy a house, you understand what the process is. It's not necessarily enjoyable, but you have a little bit of foundation as to what's going on. And so life experience would have been a little bit more helpful. That being said, I'm the type of person who I think if I would have taken a year off, I probably would have been 2 years off, or maybe 3 years off, and I'm not sure I would have been able to get myself to do it. So it's going to be different strokes for different folks, certainly. I didn't think I was at a detriment, certainly, when I was in law school, and maybe it was a little steeper learning curve, not having that life experience as much as some of my peers.
Thank you.
I suppose my question is the flip side of that for Professor Gilbert.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to take that gap year and especially work on campus during that time?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of think of my gap year as like a gap year with a safety net. It was an unwritten contract between me and the English professors that it was only to be a one-year position and I better get my ass to grad school and get this done. The thing is, like, when I was in my senior year, I started to feel this panic that I wasn't going to be able to do grad school applications justice and do senior year justice. There were tests I had to take, there were gaps in my, because of my own choosing of certain classes, there were gaps in my education that I needed to kind of take care of to learn some stuff that I needed to use to take some of those tests, specifically the GRE literature test, which is bare, right? How can you have a test that asks you about everything ever written in English or translated in English since the beginning of written literature? That's just insane. But anyway, for me it was incredibly useful because I could give it my attention and do my best at giving it my attention and do all of that. But working on campus was great because, like I said, I had all of those professors reminding me of what my goal was, reminding me that, taking more time off wasn't a good idea and wasn't an option, frankly, because they were going to kick me out. And they were there to help me with the process, right? Help me kind of navigate the process, but also be there to write recommendation letters and those sorts of things. It was a weird position to be in because the secretary of the English department suddenly quit before the school year started, and I happened to just be the person who was still around, and I had worked at English House for so long. They were all like, please come back and write the manual for the person we're going to hire after you. And that's literally what I did. I ran the department and I wrote the manual for the person who took over after I left, and I worked on my grad school applications. I was also living with a roommate at the time who was a fellow Wesleyan graduate who was also taking some time off to figure out what she wanted to do. And so we were kind of in that weird zone together. I don't mean to scare you, but we did call it the summer of sadness because we were just so unsure about our lives and what we were doing. But I look back on that time now pretty fondly, actually. And I thought it was great for me because I just felt so much pressure to do it right, and I wanted to have the time to do it right. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For anyone from the supplies, do you feel that your education at Wesleyan was beneficial and it helped you get into grad school? Do you feel like you were prepared to go to graduate school?
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. I mean, my parents are like, I'm kind of figuring something my own, and I just don't know much about it. So do you feel like your education here was beneficial, whether you went to graduate school and or if you just went straight into your career in some?
I think I'll answer for myself and then others can answer. In terms of being prepared to go to grad school, I mentioned that I was in this insane intensive program where you got a 2-year degree in 10 months. And so my time at Wesleyan, I think, did prepare me in the sense of I was very, very good and adept at doing a lot of things all at once and giving it my all, right? I was very good at staying focused, and I was a good student. I knew how to be a good student. And so in that sense, I was very well prepared to be thrown into these rigorous classes and this rigorous program and keep my head above water. On the flip side, and in some ways I don't think I could have really possibly been prepared. There was a 2-week sort of transition, little 2-week period for the people in my program because it was such an intensive thing. We met 2 weeks before the actual school year started and had to take this 2-week writing course with our cohort. And we would write these 1-page papers that I was getting D's on because I wasn't writing at a grad school level yet, and I didn't know how to do that yet because I couldn't possibly know how to do that yet. And so in some ways, yes, I was very prepared in terms of the abilities I was bringing to the table, in terms of my students' abilities and my time management and those sorts of things, but the level of thinking conceptually and writing and technicalities and that had to be learned right then and there, and I couldn't know what was ahead for me.
I'll say I have not been to grad school, and that's okay. I know that in my department, in the psychology department specifically, I know we felt like there was a lot of pressure to go to grad school because everyone said, well, you can't do anything with a psych degree unless you have a master's or higher, which is false. But I know a lot of my classmates went right from graduating here, jumping into a master's program or a PhD program, several of whom have dropped out and decided they wanted to do something different. And I think that if they had given themselves a little bit more time to actually work in the field and figure out what resonated with them, they may have made a different choice about grad school. So I think there's nothing wrong with graduating and then kind of getting some real world experience working in your field and then deciding what you want to do. Like, I do hope to go to grad school at some point in the future, but right now, like, I'm in my dream job and I didn't need any more classes for that. So don't feel like grad school is the only option. You can do a lot with the degree that you have when you finish here.
And my best attorney answer would be is it depends. And I totally agree with Kathy, is that there's an aspect of Wesleyan that certainly prepares you for the difficulty that can be grad school, but there's another part of it specifically for law school, is that the process of going through law school is so radically different than what the Wesleyan classroom is. You're sitting, I'm going to say CLA because I know that's still a building here when I, Holmes Halls where I say the classes, and I'm classes there. But you're sitting inside CLA and you're in a group of maybe 20 people and you're learning, but you're also maybe more having a conversation. First year of law school, I was sitting in an auditorium with 75 people who are complete strangers to me, and the professor is cold calling people and they're asking you about cases from the early 1900s, trying to teach you contract law, and they're intentionally asking you questions that are going to make you look foolish because it's the process in which they're supposed to be teaching you. And so despite the fact that I read 3 books that were the How to Prepare for Law School books, there was no preparing for it. And the other side I would say about whether grad school is both really necessary is my wife was an accounting major, and Wesleyan has a fantastic accounting program, and the business program is fantastic too, but that was a position for her where she had a job lined up 18 months before she graduated, and there's no masters in accounting that you need in order to just hit the ground running for that and actually make really good money. So it depends a little bit on what your degree is, and also too that you're ultimately walk from your professional needs.
I'll add to that and piggyback to the study abroad question, right? One way in which study abroad can really help you is you're a fish out of water when you're in a different culture, you're a fish out of water when you're in grad school. It teaches you to adapt and to learn the culture and to figure it out quickly.
Well,
Oh, sorry. I also have a question for Matt. So how did you go from wanting to write to wanting to go to law school? And also, how did your English degree help you in law school and now?
Sure. As I said earlier, writing for an audience was really important, and also writing well, equally important. And I think I've got to do some appellate practice. There's a trial court, there's an appellate court, and this Supreme Court. With the appellate court, all you're doing is writing. Initially, you're presenting a brief to the court, and that's your opportunity to tell, for example, why you should have won, or why the judge was initially wrong, or initially right as to get why you won. And so having that writing background, and then being able to write, in my opinion, and hopefully Dr. Kinney would agree, that writing at a high level was a way to, if somebody, some of the hardest things that I have to deal with in a practice standpoint, if somebody ends up higher garbage and says, judge, do this, we have to first figure out what this is, and it's that much more difficult to respond to something that's poorly written than to something that's written really well. And then also, too, taking the writing and then articulating it. And so going to court, making a closing argument, going to the appellate court and making the arguments in front of the appellate court is, if you've got that good base, you translate your writing into your outline then is what your whole argument's going to be, and you can still tell the story, which is the English writing component that I enjoy, but then also you're advocating for something that's
Yeah, my question was for Ms. O'Connor. I just wanted to know more about your experience with Project Oz and what you did there.
Yes, so Project Oz does a lot of different things. It's local. If you guys, I don't know if you know, like where retrofit culture is over on the west side, that's where we are. And so Project Oz started off as an agency that helped runaway youth, and now we do a lot of different things. So the department that I work in is prevention education. So we do substance abuse prevention education with middle schoolers, and then we do suicide prevention education as my program. But then the majority of people who work at Project Oz work in direct youth services. So we have a lot of social workers, a lot of people with psych degrees, sociology degrees, who directly work with young people, either between the ages of 10 and 17 who are homeless and who have run away from home, or between the ages of 18 and 24 who are trying to establish themselves, as adults and figure out all of that nonsense, who maybe don't have a lot of support in their life. So everything we do is about young people and families, but there are places for people who want to teach, like me, and there are places for people who want to do direct counseling or case management. We also have counselors who are based in the local high schools, like Bloomington High School, Normal Community, and Normal West. So they're there every day, helping students deal with the challenges that they face.
My question was for Kathy Gilbert. I was just wondering how you managed to get that internship opportunity with the La Brea Tar Pits.
Well, it helps when your great-grandfather was one of the first to excavate there. No, they have a volunteer program. A lot of their workers in the fossil lab are volunteers, and so I just applied to the volunteer program. You're supposed to be local to do that, but I explained that I was on a sabbatical and I would be there for a few months, and could I? And they said, yes, of course. I'd already been a couple times before, too, in a behind-the-scenes component, but you can volunteer at the fossil lab. You can also volunteer in excavation, but excavation is like the second tier. So you spend so long working in the fossil lab, cleaning fossils and sorting microfossils before you're allowed to go learn how to actually dig. I spent about 2 or 3 days in excavation at the end of my time there, and it was a lot of fun.
So if you don't have any kind of familial connection, is there still any?
You can still, if you're in the area, you can still volunteer. It's just an application process. It's really not, there were all kinds of people volunteering there. Retired people, young people who had jobs in the science field or not, like just anybody really. I have some family members who used to work in excavation like during the summers when they grew up because they still live in California. So yeah, I totally apply if you're in the area. It's really fun. You can give them my name if you want to. My great-grandfather's picture's on the wall, so I know who Gilbert is.
Alumni connection.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Alrighty, well, that concludes our panel for tonight. I think we need to give a huge round of applause. If time allots for our panelists to stay, don't hesitate to come up and make those alumni connections and ask questions.
Thank you.
Thanks,